I don't know about you, but I really love to learn. And I have found that the older I get, the more intentional I have to be about making sure that I am putting new information in front of me and exposing myself to new types of presentations and new ways of thinking and just new stuff. And I have found that one of the best ways for me to do that and incorporate it into the life that I'm already leading is by listening to or watching a podcast or a podcast presentation. A TED Talk is another one of those ways to, in 18 minutes, get a blast of information that you can wrestle through and chew upon. And over this last couple of weeks, I have been listening to a particular podcast by a guy named Leonard Sweet, and he's talking about things that we need to know. And I loved, and I haven't been able to get past this, and I've been kind of chewing on it, and it's actually the theme of our next series, and that is amazing stories. And in my lifetime, I have seen a shift within the Christian world where we have kind of moved from a focus on chapters and verses in the Bible to stories in the Bible. And it's not that people aren't capable of grasping verses and chapters and looking at it in that way, but the Bible, as I am learning and I continue to have reemphasized, was never intended to just be about chapters and verses, because that isn't how God presented it to people in the first place. It was in the forms of stories that were passed down from generation to generation. The chapters and verses that exist in Scripture right now were put there by scholars very recently so we would have points of reference. And so we've moved from this like focus on the written word to a story. And what does the story mean? I think about the significance of the story of redemption that runs through the Bible and is touched on in every single book. In that particular story, we see redemption, we see restoration, we see rescue, we see salvation, we see God intervening and doing impossible things. It's pretty neat when you think about the scriptures are made up of 75% story, about 15% poetry, which leaves about 10% that was like directives or commandments or was like literal, here's the declarations. So much of Scripture is intended for us to process and internalize and then live out and contextualize as story. What if we were to look at our own lives as a story and look for the places that God has intersected and intervened in our family historically and in our life, particularly in the stories that we would share with others that tell of who God is and what He's done and where He's met us? Really, it's one of those things in Revelation chapter 12. We shouldn't be surprised, but in Revelation chapter 12, it says that God's people overcame the enemy, the devil, through three things: by the blood of the Lamb, by the word of the testimony, the story of God's intervention, and by our willingness to hold on to the truth of Christ and to hold on to Him even to the point of death. Now, in no way, shape, or form do I look at it and think, oh man, I can't wait to die, but I sure can tell you the story of Jesus and what He's done in me and through me and around me is one that I want to tell to every person in my family. I want to share that with my kids and with my grandkids. And I want to also learn how to go through Scripture better. I want to learn how to understand the chapters and verses and how that's presented. But more than anything, I want to tell a compelling story of what Jesus has done in my life. And my thought process, my invitation to you is maybe it's time for you to consider how God has impacted you in the story of you and Him. I'd love to hear your story. I'd love to hear you tell about it. How'd you get to where you are? How did you get to be like you are? It's precious. I hope there's something in here that's helpful to you. Pursue exploring your story. See what comes out of it. God bless you. Have a great rest of your week.